it's so interesting that we brought that up, because what you just mentioned is a lot of what we think and talk about. This Iranian experience with European modernity and the different responses to that, and how that basically colors even, you could say, the type of Iranian you are. So really, I think easy way to basically all the types of Iranians that exist, it's just various responses to that period. So whether you are a pro government Islamist, or a quietist Islamist, or a secularist nationalist, or a global secularist, or a communist, or a whatever you are, basically it's just your response to that experience, almost. I think, I don't know if that's too simplifying, but like that encounter in the late 1800s with the Cossack brigades and the British and whatnot, all of the ideologies that Iranians fight and kvetch about are just basically responses to that moment. I don't know, you're
Yeah.
the historian of this era,
No,
tell
no,
me if I'm wrong.
I agree with you. I mean, I think in a way, Iranian history for the past, say, 125 years has been, in a way, kind of a torture relationship to the constitutional movement, because the constitutional
Yeah,
movement, I mean, it goes back earlier to the last quarter of the 19th century. But if you want to put the constitutional movement as kind of the beginning of Iranian modernity, in a sense, in a way, Iranian history since has been a torture relationship with that, where we were trying to figure things out based
yeah.
on those modernization reforms
Hmm.
that happened with the constitutional movement of
Yeah,
1906.
yeah.
And I think in a
Tortured is
way
a
it
perfect
create
word.
yeah, and in a way I think it creates a lot of confusion for our identity, for our system of governance. And
Yeah,
in a way, I think, I
absolutely.
mean, if you look at the Islamic Republic political system, it has elements from the constitutional movement. It has the representative parliamentary elements, but it also has the velayat faqih, or the guardianship of the jurist. That, in a way, is Khomeini's reinterpretation of earlier ideas that were, in circulation in Shia jurisprudence, and
Yeah.
also in the in the Qajar period. So there's a text, Mullah Ahmad Naraghi, Velayat Faqih, titled Velayat Faqih in Arabic, but then his idea of Velayat Faqih was that there is a jurist that has guardianship over the orphans and people who cannot take care of themselves or take care of their own properties. So it's a very
Wait,
limited
Narohi
notion
earlier
of.
than Khomeini, right? He's
Yeah, yeah.
earlier
So
than, I've
this
seen
is
him. Interesting.
this is during Fath Ali Shah's kingship. So during the early Qajar period, he writes a book called Velayat Faqih, but it's a very limited notion of the guardianship of the jurist. So the idea is that the executive power rests with the king, and the jurist has power, over the orphans and over people who cannot take care of
Interesting.
their own properties, over the people who have mental incapacity, and so on. But with Khomeini, I mean, he reinterprets it to include basically the Wali Faqih becomes the person who also rules the state. So what's happening is, my point is that because of modernity and colonialism and all that, you have this political system that, in a way, reinterprets tradition for the contemporary purposes, also has
Hmm.
parliamentary elements, and it becomes a
Yeah,
very
yeah.
hybrid system. I mean, some people say it's contradictory, but in my interpretation, it's not so much contradictory; it's hybrid. Going back to traditional clothing, I think it's similar, because if you look at,
Yeah, yeah,
say,
yeah.
you reinterpret the Turkoman clothes and you shorten the sleeve, in a way, it's not a contradictory piece of clothing.
Hmm.
Rather, it's a hybrid piece of clothing that's taken element from the
Yeah.
modern ermine production. And
I agree. Yeah, that's so. Some people took Wahalak's impossible state too far. A lot of these super traditionalist religious people are always saying that, oh, it's impossible to have a Muslim country modernity because the Sharia is independent and the Sultan. And you've heard these arguments, right? About
Mhm.
how it's impossible to have a modern Muslim country. Well, my response to that is something along the lines of what you said: is that, did anyone think that it's possible to have a sultan and if your answer is that it's impossible in the modern world, then is the response to that, then our civilization just dies, that we quit trying to have a civilization? I mean, obviously not, right? I mean, the idea is we want our civilization to proceed and perpetuate itself into the modern world. We don't want to just give up, because that's what most other Eastern civilizations have done, right? Like China has in effect given up. It torched its traditional civilization. It changed its script. They were even going to change to Latin. Simplified Chinese was actually a middle ground. There, I mean, what about China is Chinese anymore, right? It's just state cap. God bless them. They're progressing really well, but it's just like a Western country. And what Korea, Japan, South Asia is obviously for 200 years have been talking about colonial hangover, and they speak English instead of their native languages. I mean, what part of the world has any semblance of its own authentic lived reality left, right?
Yeah,
Iran is one of the few places.
and I mean, this is a really good actually objection to Wal Halak, because yeah, I mean, so Wal Halak's argument is that, for our audience who haven't read The Impossible State, is that the modern state is fundamentally incompatible with Sharia governance, and if you want to rule based on the Sharia, you cannot do it within the confines of the modern state. So that's why it's called the impossible state. But I think, like you're saying, Khomeini's response would be that no, I'm gonna, like, because the other alternative is that you just give up and become these marginal figures that just advise people on ritual purity and on things like prayer, on namaz, on pilgrimage. And Khomeini's response was that no, and I'm going to actually try to have a prominent place for the Muslim jurists within the structure of the modern state. And that's why you have the hybrid system in Iran. So Khomeini's
Right. Yeah.
objection to someone like Halak, I mean, even though he died before Halak wrote his book, but I think his response would be that no, it's not impossible. And I mean, it might become a little bit fuzzy and too hybrid and too, hodgepodgey. But at the same time, I'm going to do it, and that's what I try to do.
There is an
I'm
excellent.
not putting a value judgment on. I'm not saying it was good or
Yeah,
bad.
no, I
The
agree.
system
I
they
I think
created, but
the people who watch your show are intelligent enough to understand that we're just speaking as academics here, right? We're not co-signing every politics. But there's a great line in Masnavi where Rumi says, "Dost darad yar in ashuftagi, kushish bihude beh az khuftagi." The beloved loves for us to be perplexed, bothered, in difficult straits. Striving in vain is better than falling asleep. And I think this really kind of encapsulates my attitude towards Iran, which is that people will come and say that clearly Iran's project has had some successes and failures. And a lot of Iranians today will talk about its many failures and whatnot. But what I will say is there's something laudable about the Iranian people, that we at least tried to create an Iranian alternative to modernity, whether it was the leftist Iranians, all of them, all the people who partook in the revolution and whatnot, and all the thinkers, even the ones who had nothing to do with politics, even your Sayyid Hossein Nasr and all these people, what they share in common is that they're trying to create something authentically Iranian in the modern world, whereas the other civilizations didn't even try. They just held up the white flag and went into the pages of history. So, it's better to have kushisha bihude than khoftagi, than just to fall asleep and be nothing. Iran, of course, Iranians, materially speaking, their lives are much more difficult than people in the Persian Gulf states. But the Persian Gulf states, do they have any respectability in the world? Does anyone look up to them? Does anyone admire anything that they do? Yeah, if you just become a modern state and just accept whatever the West tells you, and accept Israel, and accept all of the indignities, and just be a gas station for the Western system. I don't know. There's also some indignity there as well. Unfortunately, there's no good
of
answer for
course.
us. Sadly,
Although
there's no easy answer.
No, it's true. But although ironically, the Persian Gulf states, they've preserved the traditional clothing much more so
Just
than
that, it's
Iranians.
like the only traditional thing. Like everything about their countries is just purely modern, even in like the most garish, and even more than America. Like I always say, New York is so traditional seeming, even compared to these Gulf states. New York is like the epicenter of American culture now, and modernity and whatnot. But even still, like, we have all these edifices still, right? Whereas in the Gulf states, it's like everything is from 10 years ago. Everything is just like hyper modernity, kind of like Chongqing in China. But anyway, not to say that,
No.
I'm glorifying Iran and its struggle. You say Saddam as Jay Gamdam, right? Like I'm sitting here in New York and saying, wow, Iran's trying great. But we definitely did fail for sure. There's a lot of failures. But I think, again, the fact that Iran even bothered to try speaks the fact that the Iranian spirit, the soul, the civilization is still alive. China didn't
Yeah.
even bother. China looked at itself in 1900 after its century of humiliation and said, "Oh, dang, why don't we just do whatever one of those people are doing to catch up?" And they picked probably the one that wasn't catching up fast enough, the communist side, but they still caught up using it. But they lost their Chineseness. What's Chinese about China?
Mm.
What's Chinese about being Marxist and being capitalist and making iPhones and, Labubus or whatever? There's nothing Chinese about that place. None of their cities even look Chinese. All their cities are just like cringy versions of modern America, like just modern glass towers. There's nothing left. You know, China, what's the difference between China and America except for them speaking, not to pick on them excessively, all countries fit this. But I think of China because Iranians always say, oh, look at China, look at China, look at China. We should be like China. But I always try to temper them and say, like, you know, actually,
Yeah.
no, it's not that great either over there.
Yeah, and I
Anyway.
mean, what's funny is like I think it's a recent thing in Iran that they actually like China now because they're seeing that
Yeah.
China in a way is replacing Japan when it comes to the production of like electronics and really like
Yeah, yeah.
sophisticated technological equipment. So now they have more respect for China.
It used to be
But yeah,
Japon and Alman. They always used to say the
yeah,
two posts were Japon, Alman, Japon. Now it's
I
China.
know, and not Japan because apparently I was hearing this from a Japanese friend that the U.S. is intentionally trying to stagnate Japanese development and
Yeah.
industrialization. So a
America
lot of this,
stymied them on purpose because they were growing too
yeah,
strong. Yeah. America
yeah. So
purposefully
that
slowed Japan's growth. Yeah.
exactly, and so now that's shifting to China. And yeah, but I mean, also the other, I think you're very much right that at least the Iranians tried, even though it wasn't perhaps like it didn't create a high quality of life or satisfaction within the population, but at least they tried. And you can criticize, whatever some of the approaches they took, but at the same time, at least they tried. And I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think with China is that one reason that they cannot be sanctioned is that you're right that they incorporated themselves too much into
Mhm.
the U.S.-led global order,
Order. Yeah.
and that's why they cannot be sanctioned. And by integrating themselves too much in the U.S.-led global order, in a way, you can say that they're not really trying to present an alternative.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. No, that's the thing. The sad story of the world today is that no one actually has a real viable alternative to Western liberalism. There's people who tried it to basically go against it, but they're too isolated, too far, too few between, whatever the reasoning is. There's no Soviet Union really anymore. Right,
Yeah.
people talk about multipolarity, but it's like a pole with some small poles. There aren't just two poles like in the days of the Soviets. And another thing about the Iranian people that's so interesting is that even people who are like, forget the government, let's just integrate into the Western-led order, let's just do it something like China is doing, whatever. Even those people do have a level of care about Iranian heritage and civilization that is just not found in other countries. Like Iranians, even secular Iranians, leftist Iranians, people who aren't for the government, aren't for its cultural protectionism, they are responding really harshly to this increase in English loanwords on the
Mhm.
internet all the time. The way I keep up with Iranian culture is through Instagram Reels, because that's where all the Iranian videos are made, whatever now. And there's all kinds of people making fun of Iranians who use excessive English loanwords. They say لازم نیست بگی create کنیم، لازم نیست بگی خیلی کوله، میتونی بگی خیلی باحاله درست کنیم، لازم نیست بگی نمیدونم appetizer ها، پیش غذا هم ایرادی نداره کلاسش. But like, I'm sorry, it's speaking Persian. There's no need to say
Yeah.
English words. Like, you can just use the original Persian ones that we've had. And these come
Yeah.
from,
Another.
you know,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Another one is focus, like they say focus instead of
Yeah.
focus.
And
And I'm
sometimes
like,
I course.
or
Yeah.
instead of
But
tahlil, we say analyze. And I'm like, you don't need
it
to say
sounds like
analyze.
and
We have, yeah,
analyze.
we have
Yeah,
actual
yeah, yeah.
Persian words for, or I guess tahlil is
Yeah,
Arabic,
yeah,
but
exactly. No, but we
yeah.
even have Persian words. Yeah. So the thing is, I mean, that's what gives me hopes. That's what gives me hope about Iran is that even if tomorrow a government came that was fully accommodationalist like Turkey, the grassroots care for our culture is so strong. I remember you and I, but you're old enough to remember this. A lot of people I speak to nowadays, like 18, they come to my class and they tell me I was born in 2004, and I'm like, oh my God, you're so young. But you
Yeah.
remember when Pinglish was the norm for typing in Persian in like 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7, because there weren't Persian keyboards. And when
Yeah.
Persian keyboards were invented, people were still typing in Pinglish. And it was a grassroots cultural effort that got people to stop using Pinglish. People would say, I remember professors would say, "Agar kasi man Pinglish benivise javabsh nemidam." I'll just say write in
Hmm.
Persian. If someone types me in Pinglish, Latinized Persian, I say I won't respond to you. You live in Pakistan now. In South Asia, this is a massive problem for Hindi and Urdu, is that the youth type in Latinized, Romanized Urdu or Hindi, and they struggle to read Divangari or Nastaliq font, a lot of them.
Yeah.
Even they're
They
born
don't
and
use
raised
it.
there.
They just use
Yeah, they don't
the
use
the
it.
Latin font. Yeah.
Exactly. So this is a
Mm.
grassroots level of care that Iranians have. Even another thing, the traditional clothing revival is not being led by religious, Islamist, Taliban supporter type people. It's being led by secular hipster kids. Like if you go to these
Yeah.
neo-traditionalist Persian clothing stores, the people who work there are all like artsy, liberal, secular kids. So
100%.
what gives me hope is that there is no polarization around the importance of Iranian culture in Iran. Everyone loves Hafiz. Everyone loves Nastalir. Everyone loves our traditional architecture, right? Like, even if anything, it skews towards the liberals, like the
Yeah, yeah.
Islamic Republic. Go ahead.
And I mean, the funny thing is that you're saying like the hipster kids,
Yeah.
even though a lot of it is like very much weaved into with Islam, like, you can really
Yeah.
separate the
Yeah.
Iranian and the Islamic when it comes to, say, like the architecture, for example, but they don't see it that way. They don't really call it like
Yeah.
Islamic architecture. And I think that's how they,
Yeah.
the ones that are not religious, that's how they're kind of
Yeah.
like
So
still
it's
proud
like,
of
to
it.
give you an example, the Islamic Republic wants to demolish a shrine. I've seen a guy I talked to the internet does like Iranian architecture kind of preservation work in Iran. He'll post a photo of a shrine that the Islamic Republic is demolishing from like 300 years ago. And the Islamic Republic is just like, oh, we want to make a bigger shrine for more pilgrims. The people who resist the demolition are people who would never go to a shrine. They're secular, liberal, architectural enthusiasts. And same when they want to demolish an old bathhouse in Junub Shah that no one goes to, like, no, make it a museum. They're all liberals. The clothing, the boutique hotels in Isfahan and Kashan and Yazd, an old family wants to sell a traditional house to demolish it. And liberals will come buy it and turn it into a hostel or a boutique hotel or a cafe. The old cafes that you and I used to go to in Tehran, they're all run by liberals. So what gives me hope, like the Islamic Republic, I was going to say, when they want to build a building, they will create a brutalist government building. We have so many brutalist government buildings in Iran. For some odd reason, I think they were copying the communists. The people who say, no, we should have traditional architecture are liberals. So it gives me hope in Iran is that there's no future in Iran where, regardless of who is in charge, there's no future where we'll stop caring about traditional Iranian things. There's always a contingent of a broad spectrum of people who care about our clothing and our history. And the people who message me, they say دمت گرم لباس محلی رو احیا کن ما 100% پشتتی منم قبولت دارم. The people who basically send me supportive messages, I click on their profile, they're not like religious at all. They're like normie secular Tehranis, and that gives me so much hope. So anyway,
Yeah, that's nice. Although you also get messages, I saw you posted
yeah.
that why you're wearing Arab clothing, right?
Yeah. So that
No.
brings me to the point that we should talk about a lot. This mindset that some Iranians have, that some people say the secular mindset, the diaspora, the Pahlavis, the Shahi, there's a lot of terms that people use, but we all know what we're talking about. This type of Iranian who has a very toxic relationship with their culture. They think anything traditional is Arab or Islamist. They hate all traditional things. This person's psyche is one of those mindsets that was born after our traumatic relationship or encounter with the West. That some people said, no, we need to be more Islamic. Some people said we need to be secular. A certain group were also born, that Reza Zia Ibrahimi has talked a lot about in his book. These people who have this weird notion of a real Iranian identity, and that it's conspiratorial. It's like QAnon. That the people who run Iran, or the Iranians now, are like fake Iranians, and that the real Iranian identity is like hiding somewhere. Does that sound right? That's kind of what they talk about.
Yeah. No, and I mean also there is this idea that, I mean, even you see it in the Shah's era, because one of the newspapers during the second Pahlavi era accused Khomeini of not being Iranian, of being Indian,
Yeah, being
and
Kashmiri or whatever.
yeah, that has continued. I mean, to this day, there's this idea that the mullahs in Iran who rule
They're Arabs.
Iran, they're not really
Arabani
Iranian.
no Irani
Yeah.
nistan. They're Arabs. They're not Iranians. Look at their noses. We
Yeah.
haven't seen these people. We know what's funny is there's a grain of truth to it, which is that Iran was not a country the way it is today. It didn't have sealed borders. So there were Iranian peoples in Herat and Samarkand and in North India and southern Iraq, because these places were all part of broader Iran, greater Iran in this civilizational sense. And then what happened is Iranians were always moving around. And then when some people happened to just be moving when the borders were created and they gave you a shanasnameh. So they said, oh, Aghay Tabai in Najaf, you're Iraqi. Aghay Jahromi in Bahrain, you're Bahraini. Aghay Hindizadeh in southern Iran, you're Iranian. Aghay Kashani in northern India, you're Indian. Aghay Herati living in Tabriz, you're Iranian. Aghay Nakhjavani living in Bukhara, you're Uzbek. So they just got trapped with the borders. Because of my work, I know tons of people, literally like hundreds, who've told me, oh, I'm Iranian. My grandparents are from Hamadan, but I was born in Uzbekistan. But we got trapped behind the Soviet borders. Or my family, all 8 of my great grandparents are Iranian, but I was born and raised in Kuwait or Najaf, and my name is Beh Bahani. So Khomeini might have been originally living in North India, but his ancestors somehow, or some of these mullahs who are Iraqi, but they're all Persian Iraqis. They're Ajam. They're not actual Iraqis. So these
Yeah, yeah.
seculars say, oh, they're Iraqi, they're Iraqi. But it's like he's Persian Iraqi, though.
No, no, I mean, also, there is some truth to it in a sense that if you look at the Safavid period, when they're trying to promote Shiism, they bring a lot of
Yeah,
because
yeah,
there were
yeah. The
not too many
mullahs.
Shia jurists. There were not too many
Yeah,
Shia
yeah.
jurists in the Iranian mainland that was being
Plateau.
ruled by the
Yeah, yeah.
Safavid. So they import them from Bahrain, from the Levant, from Jabal Amil.
Jabal Amal. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of them come from there.
That is true.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, but then the broader point is that, like you're saying, because the borders were more fluid, it wasn't just it wasn't just the mullahs. It was other people who were coming and
Everyone.
going from other places. So yeah, I mean, so the whole argument that it's just the
I
mullahs
mean,
now that are not Iranian is ridiculous.
I've seen some of these Iranians who make the mullahs aren't Arab argument on the internet with last names like Tabatabai, Sayyid Hosseini, Arab, Arabi, Arabi, Turki, Kabuli. Like literally, the people would be commenting on my page, "You're an Arab," pretending to be Iranian. And his last name was Sayyid Hossein Tabatabai, his name on the internet or something like that. And I said, that's really rich of you. You're literally a descendant of the Arab invaders. And I'm a native Iranian. I'm just, as far as I know, indigenous. I don't know if any descent. All 8 of my great grandparents or whatever on either side were just rural Iranians. So for all I know, I'm fully indigenous, right? It's really rich of you to call me the mullah and to call you call yourself. And you know what he responded? He said, I'm a fully assimilated Iranian and I'm ashamed of my ancestors and I condemn them.
Oh my God.
So it's like the brainworm is lodged so deep in his brain that he couldn't just say, oh, you're right. This is ridiculous. He had to condemn his own ancestors. Anyway, I've met many
Yeah.
Iranians who criticize me, and I know they're Sayyids because their family members are friends. And they say, literally, they'll tell me, "Khajalat mikesham ke Sayyidam." They'll literally
So
say, I'm
I'm
embarrassed.
yeah.
I'm
Mhm.
embarrassed to be a Sayyid of my ancestors. It's subhanAllah. It's incredible.